Good morning, Misfits. Probably not the voice you were expecting to hear on this podcast, I imagine. Usually behind the camera. Just dropping in to let you know that we had some severe audio issues during the recording of this episode. So the audio that I was able to salvage is what you're going to be getting here. I didn't want to leave you guys without another episode after a couple of weeks hiatus, being on the road at the games and all that. So all you missed, really, snack chat next time. And Hunter's intro. Hunter played host this episode. Let us know how you like it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy. Here you have it. The coach's thoughts on the CrossFit Games.
Chris.
Oh my God.
Unbelievable. He's going to be so pissed.
I was honestly more concerned about, I said Lydia, didn't I?
You did.
Yeah. I was more concerned about forgetting the new coaches and like not saying Austin.
Fuck. Who?
Yeah. So
he definitely doesn't listen.
Shout
to
out Chris. Also, this is how you know that I didn't forget Chris as a slight. I desperately wanted engine class to exist and people to show up. And once I stopped coaching it and Chris started coaching it, it was better and people started showing up. So I am forever indebted to Chris convincing people to start doing.
That engine program is available with your subscription to Team Misfit affiliate programming, which has received some very good feedback over the last couple months.
It
really,
ties so well into what we talk about on here with the athlete IQ and, what is the intro to that? Because if you're saying stuff like that to people that are doing triplets that are new, you might as well just be doing
the wall by yourself.
Yeah, you're doing is it Peanuts where it's like, wah, or Charlie Brown, or wah, 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 like when adults talk. That's what that sounds like to someone. But if you have a beautiful little number in front of you and you're like, wow, 130 to 230, that's a really good range to hold.
Very.
So big shout out to the staff that we have next door. I don't think 13 years in that space with being a profitable entity would be possible without the people. So proud Papa moment.
And the members, obviously.
Oh, of course. If you build it, they will come.
If you build it, they will come. Speaking of engine class and 2K rowing, we did that earlier this week. My least favorite workout of all time.
I was sad I couldn't be here to watch you do it.
PR nonetheless, along with a shitload of PRs across like Discord. We're kind of talking about predominantly because we are in kind of the middle of phase 0 right now. It's kind of our baseline testing. We're asking athletes to test things like your 10K row, your 5K row, all the kind of spans the spectrum of time domains and then different machines along with our kind of individual benchmarks. And we are seeing a lot of PRs, particularly you noticed on like the longer stuff, which means, it means a lot of things, but people kind of accepting and really embracing the MF2, formerly Maffetone type stuff, the long, slow work. And I think just in general, being willing to pound pavement for extended periods of time and accept the importance of the long stuff that has historically been difficult for athletes to embrace.
The thing I like best is I see the athletes that I'm working with set aside the ego component of it, are actually understanding that all they are doing is setting a baseline for their season so they can train more effectively and aren't worried about like, oh, I have the worst 2K time on the board and everyone's gonna make fun of me. Because like that is a really real thing athletes experience, that they're worried about putting up either the worst score and it's not their best effort. But the goal here is to set the baseline so you get more from your training day in and day out. So like I had a conversation with Lindsay the other day about doing I think it was a 10K row. And she's like, I did this a little while ago. It was probably like 8 or 9 months ago. Do you really want me to do it again? And I'm like, don't you think you've gotten fitter? She's like, yeah. I'm like, do you think you know your answer to the question now? She's like, yeah. I'm like, again, the point here is we want to make sure you're set up for an effective year of training, and that has to be done on a somewhat regular basis. Otherwise, you'll never be updating those numbers, which means you might be giving yourself a pass on some of these things that you've gotten a lot better at.
It's also good if haven't done those things in a long time to like revisit them. We're doing some benchmarks here at the affiliate and workouts people haven't done in years, and it's like, how did I shave 2 minutes off my time or whatever? And it's like, you got fitter.
Yeah, in my mind, it spans the entire spectrum of like hearing that athletes here following the Team Misfit affiliate programming are PRing their 2K and then going into Discord and seeing someone knock 5 seconds, like multiple people knocked 5 seconds off per 500 or per 1K if it's on the C2 bike on multiple tests. And in my mind, it's like we know that if executed properly, what we do works. We've been doing this for long enough, but a lot of our job is convincing people to do it and sort of giving them a bit more of the how-to. So that is a full circle moment for us. And then I think you really get the buy-in from people. Now, I think the hard part is for people that are new to Misfit Athletics going in and seeing this stuff. Not only are they seeing scores that are potentially better than theirs, but they're going in and seeing times that probably don't feel so great to see on the screen. And it's really just 1 year of do the things that we ask you to, choose the right weaknesses, when there is variability to choose within the program. And then you get to be the like you're no longer the cautionary tale. You're the example that we talk about during phase 0 next year.
What's cool too is if you do go and do one of those tests and you don't perform, like you have a lot to unpack there. Was it your strategy? Was it your headspace? Was it your warm up? Was it how you decompressed from the last day of training? There's a lot to learn from these sessions that aren't just what your time was at the end of the event. And I think that's one of the things that's starting to become more common in the space, and you see it on Discord where people reflect upon pieces and how they approach things. Like, dig into that stuff more. The more you dig into that, the more you reap from kind of the whole phase 0 experience.
So before we dive into, we're going to talk programming, we're going to talk team stuff and individuals, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't shout out and congratulate all of our, actual Misfit followers who are competing out there. Jenna, Mike, Justin, Paige, Alexis, Caroline, please help me out.
Shaylin, Aaron. I mean, obviously shout out as well to the men on those two teams.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Very team oriented experiences there. I know that for myself, being able to help the Krypton team, it really made me feel more like this definitely was a Misfit thing. And I know you felt the same when it came to the Franco's team. So, the experiences that we have out there are the ones where you want to stay locked in and present while you're there, because there are some years where we have freaking 25 athletes out there, and there are some years that we have 12. And if you get so wrapped up in the number of how many athletes do we have, how many podiums do we have, versus the experience of you coaching there and helping people and building relationships, I don't know. It's like an empty pursuit. And that's something that you need to learn over time, that experiences are really what we're after more than anything else. So, definitely a big shout out to all of them, because they're the ones who make it possible for us to have those experiences. All right, Misfits, just a quick break to shout out our show sponsors and give you an opportunity to support the podcast by heading to these links, using these codes, all that good stuff. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Sharpen the Axe. You can head to sharpentheaxeco.com August 18th and 19th for the latest edition of our mystery box sale. I'm not going to lie, you people are fools for this mystery box stuff. And it's an opportunity for us to sort of get the old out and have some new stuff come back in. So we are doing 3 different tiers, and you're basically building your own mystery box. So all tees, crops, long sleeve bras, and booty shorts are going to be $10 each. All hoodies are $15 each, and all pants and men's shorts are going to be $20 each. So you can go in and you click the item and you choose, I want this, I want that, and you build your own box, and it's going to be fantastic. And it's going to be at sharpentheaxeco.com on August 18th and 19th.
If you need an endorsement for Team Misfit Gym's affiliate programming, something we're really passionate about here, look no further than Caroline Connors, who just wrapped up the CrossFit Games, has been taking Team Misfit affiliate programming all week for a ride, and says it's as terrible, if not more terrible, than the CrossFit Games she just finished. And I mean terrible in a good way. Extremely effective, high dose of intensity, making sure we sprinkle in skills. We've got long stuff, we got short stuff, we got everything an affiliate might need to make sure their members are getting as fit as possible. And we help you with coaches' notes and videos and everything that a coach might need to deliver a really effective class. You can head to teammisfit.com or the Sugarboard Marketplace to find Team Misfit affiliate programming. It is excellent. Do not miss out on it.
And we are also obviously brought to you by Misfit Athletics. You can join us for phase 0 happening right now at misfitathletics.com. Gathering the data for this upcoming training year is going to be critical to your success. So we need you guys to get in there, do the tests, make sure that you have accurate information so that when phase 1 kicks off September 4th, you guys are ready to roll, kind of hit the ground running. Again, you can head to misfitathletics.com to get signed up 2-day.
I have the luxury of being the designer of the products at Proper Fuel. And my largest motivation for doing that was being able to tell athletes when they ask, well, where do I get that? And how do I do this? You can go exactly to this place that we know, that we trust. We're at the CrossFit Games and going into the bike event. Very standard protocol that you have in the endurance community. It's called sodium loading.
Paige loves it.
Paige took 2 scoops of hydrate and 16 ounces of water the night before. She had a pretty funny Instagram meme of the kid drinking, I think it's like McDonald's cup or something, going, whoa, what is that? Obviously 1,500 milligrams of sodium in one shot is a lot. She did the same thing the next morning. After the event, I walk over, she's got this big grin on her face, and she goes, I just went pee, completely clear. And the huge endorsement really was the other athletes were in deep trouble. Emma Lawson said, I probably didn't have enough sodium, literally being interviewed on the ground. Paige walked away after a really high finish. And one of the biggest things is, okay, so maybe I made it through this event, but what are the ramifications for stressing your body out, over the course of could just be not being well hydrated going into your affiliate class and falling apart the rest of the week. So, the hydrate is a very simple product that is based on the average amount of electrolytes that are sweat out, that they did in a sweat analysis of a bunch of athletes. It's exactly what we put in there. It's the only supplement that I take every single day. It's the only supplement that I've taken every single day, basically for like a decade. Before it was just salt and it was gross. So you can head to properfuel.co, use the code word misfit. We're still, we're heading into kind of the nastiest part of the year. And basically just using a plus minus system of I wake up in the morning and I'm even, and if I sweat, I got to have another scoop, is a absolute game changer no matter what level you're at. All right, back to the show.
All right, gentlemen, we are, for the listeners, and especially if you're a little bit newer, we are definitely a little bit more centered towards the individual when it comes to programming, just based on the programs. It doesn't mean we don't coach the team athletes and teams in general, but let's start with a little bit of the team stuff. You both coached teams, or at least athletes within the teams. How was that experience at the games this year? And we can take it wherever we want. We can go programming. I know you've got some notes on movements and whatnot. There's seem to be some opinions of athletes in the moment that don't necessarily always end up being true in the final analysis. So how did we fare with the team stuff this year?
It was a unique experience for me. I've known Alec for a very long time. I've been around Ben and talked to Ben probably for just about as long. He's much more of a very reserved person, kind of stays in his lane, does his own thing. Kind of worked, won the CrossFit Games, stood on the podium, I believe, more than once. So coaching them, again, was a very new experience, but basically by the end of day one, I felt like we were a pretty cohesive unit and we're getting on the same page. And there would be strategies cooked up by different athletes, and all of them were receptive to changes within that or some type of nuance, looking at it from different perspectives. So I think that was really helpful. And then, Ben tore his patella tendon on the re-racking a jerk, hoping to save it and put it back in the rack and try to go overhead again. And I think someone with his accolades and storied career could have very easily, he's having another kid here in a few months. Like the idea of fully tearing all the way through, that's catastrophic. That's years. That's potentially,
career ending,
that kind of thing. So for him to keep going, and me knowing the works very specifically that Caroline and Aaron had put in, that was a really big deal to me. So for him to continue to do that, even though they weren't able to do what they wanted to, in terms of, certain events and placements, again, going back to that experience thing, that's something that all of them are going to remember for the rest of their life. And like I told Sherb this, the joke, Aaron's fiance is quite the character, Josh, and he told Ben that he should sell his 5K shoes because basically he tore it and then was like the voice of calm and reason for 3 miles ish. And he was like, Jordan flu game is here, and right below it is the Ben Smith 5K. Like, that's got to be tough.
I mean, able to pull it together after that catastrophic injury, to be able to just even convince himself to go do it again, and then not only not even come in last, but like hang with the team and like keep the team going, and being able to do a ton of events that you shouldn't be able to do with the injury he had. Like, it was just honestly very impressive.
And just the adaptability of the team too, and being willing to do things like, hey, we're going to do all these fucking earthworm lunges on one leg, one at a time, and like you could easily see the movement pattern kind of like very awkward for Ben, and therefore it kind of impacted everybody else. But like, but you know, being able to pull it together and be kind of that, you know, it's like I'm a leader. I have like you said, I could easily check out, or I could easily step into like this role and be kind of an inspiration, whatever you want to say.
It's like a spirit of the games kind of thing there. Like he easily could have pulled out, but he put his teammates ahead of them himself because he realized like how hard they had all worked for the entire season. And like, you know, after every event, he'd come over us and like shake his head and be like, I don't know, man, that might be.
He had to reconvince himself every event. He had to get work. He had to get work on his knee. He had to get it retaped. And that was like, okay, I think I can do this. I'm currently writing all of my like long-winded Instagram posts for all of the people that we worked with. So it's a little bit too front of mind, and I don't want to take up 45 minutes of this podcast. But I will say just really quickly about the team. Aaron not having the athlete IQ that we typically push for. We started working together in the spring. Her feeling the fear and doing it anyways in a lot of these events was really incredible, and it was pretty clear, the writing was on the wall, that she was a gamer. After semifinals, she's able to rise to the occasion, but each stage you wonder if an athlete's going to be able to do that. So for her to be able to rise to the occasion was huge. And then I'll lump her in with what I want to say about Caroline, because I think, you know, I hope the plan is I get to work with her for a whole year, and then they potentially go team together again next year. But watching Caroline in this setting, like, I'll just throw a warning out to everybody. You motherfuckers like have been put on notice. Like that athlete that was out there with the abilities that she's had, with the confidence that she had, was wild to watch. Like cool she was like, you know, the saddle was on the Bronco. And if it gets taken off, you know, if we get to a point where that gets to happen, it's going to be pretty fucking incredible to watch. So for me to just see that, like, we've been working together for a very long time. There's a, you know, very strong athlete coach connection, a lot of trust built in that area. And I really just hope that there's a, like, she came up to me after and I'm like, I don't want to put expectations on you, but I kind of want to fucking win now. I kind of want to fucking win, right? And like, I've had a dozen athletes come to me and say they want to win the CrossFit Games, and most of them,
at some point,
is that possible for you to do? Whereas this one, I was the one to kind of put that out there and say that. So really good experience going through that. I'm sure we'll get into a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't know if you want to comment.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say it was fun to finally have the opportunity to work with the team in person. Like, the one unfortunate thing about my wife giving birth right around the time that they were getting ready for semifinals, Ted actually went down to do some filming, as I was actually going to go on that trip as well, but it was just so close to the due date. I was like, listen, if I miss my wife's birth and I'm not there,
you don't need to fly home.
Your wife's birth?
You live in Pasadena now.
Just in case I was
giving birth.
My wife's birth.
Her giving birth. I would never be able to forgive myself. So like, it's just one thing as a, you know, trying to be a family man here, I couldn't miss that opportunity. So unfortunately I had to stick back. So to get a chance to actually work with everyone in person for the first time, because I've known Alexis for a really long time. She's been to camps. We've been around each other a bunch, but, you know, Shaylin have very limited experience outside of like FaceTimes and a couple of, you know, conversations over the phone. You know, I've known Brandon for a long time, but I've never really met Logan before. So to watch them put together a weekend where they had honestly minimal time to spend together because they're all busy in their own lives, like, I think it was a really good showcase of what their ability is and the potential they have. But one thing we clearly learned at the CrossFit Games is that the teams that are real teams that have that chemistry and do things all together and are always around one another. The thing that was impressed me the most about the Invictus team, not only their performance, but just how in sync they were with each other at all times. And that
They
was
were getting
huge,
trolled hard
we were
doing
making
their
fun of them.
synchro warm-ups. Like they stretched synchro.
Like,
Yeah.
And then they kicked everyone's ass.
they whooped ass. So,
So-
it's like, you know, you can mock all you want,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
proof's in the
Yeah.
pudding there. So
Wearing that white jersey probably stirs some feelings, that white and red jersey.
For sure.
I learned a lot about like what that's going to be like.
Yeah.
If you really do want to make that team commitment, like that's one thing, you know, you always hear is like, is it just forfeit individuals or is it forfeit individuals that are also really like well bonded and around each other all the time? Like it just kind of opened my eyes to what that team actually meant. Because for years you said the Mayhem squad, just like those dudes are all really fit. Those ladies are really fit. Like you're going to win the CrossFit Games. But just to see that extra level of like, individually, these athletes are still amazing, but they probably aren't, you know, taking the podium a solo, but the camaraderie they had and what they put together was impressive to watch. So, you know, as fun as it was to work with my athletes in person for the first time, I learned a lot about that element of team, and it, you know, makes me excited for the opportunity to hopefully do it again in the future.
So before we shift to individual stuff, just thinking about from a programming perspective, couple of just like very high level observations from me, not being able to track every single like team and whatnot over the course of the weekend. I know, we can chat about that too, but couple of things that stood out. One, athletes weren't on a pull-up bar, if I wasn't mistaken.
They were
no
not.
handstand push-ups, and
They
if I
did
wasn't
not.
mistaken.
Those are illegal.
Lots of what it seems to
No
be
burpees.
missing things. Was it still a well-rounded enough test for the teams?
So
4.5K instead of 5K? No one cares.
Yards.
yeah, I
It was
didn't understand why that mattered.
I don't understand why
5,000
people
yards.
complain
Although
about
I don't understand
every
why
year
people are
the-
fucking stupid.
the
So
long- it's like
True.
I just like if that's
Everyone did the test.
if you're wrapped up in that, like I don't know, maybe
hobby.
get some therapy or something.
hobby.
Okay, so as Hunter said, we've been coaching individual athletes forever, and what we do for our team athletes, we get them fit as fuck and we send them off to a team. Like that's how we've always done things. And when you get to an elite level, your skill acquisition and your competitive drive typically take over. So my first team mock games that I ever wrote was this year. So I already had a lot of data. I did the last 5 years of data. And basically what I did is I noticed the narrative from a significant amount of team athletes was they're making us bike again. They're making us run again.
Yeah.
It's another sled or whatever. And in my mind, I knew that they were probably complaining about something that wasn't worth complaining about, but I didn't feel like I had the historical context where for an athlete or an individual athlete, it's like, you're going to run X amount of miles at this thing. You better be good at it or blah, blah, blah. So with the team stuff, basically what I did is I looked at how many movements and how many times did they do them over the course of the last 5 years. We had 14 repeat movements that were like, these almost always happen. So out of 21, that's a pretty significant amount. We had 5 movements that were repeats that were, for instance, overhead squat. They did this time. They did it last year. Legless rope climbs. They've done one other time at the CrossFit Games in the team division. They did it again. There were 2 new movements. One of them, not really a new movement. Basically, they took that sandbag squat and said, you probably have 1 or 2 people on your team that hide by having someone else move the worm, and guess what? You don't get to do that.
do it. Yeah.
So is that really a new movement? Maybe. Maybe you can consider that.
probably like for a team as
Right.
far as like
Yeah.
the coordination and the communication goes, that's might be more valuable than
Yeah.
like the implement for the individual itself.
They haven't done a farmer's carry, at least in the last 5 years, but was it a farmer's carry? You were holding on to the jerry can with your teammate and leaning as far to the opposite side as you could.
Or if you're Brandon Logan, you dragged it across the floor.
They've done sandbag carries, they've done sandbag holds in the past. So nothing like really, really new. The movements that they've done 2 to 5 times in the last 5 years that they did not do this year: box jump over, traditional rope climb, handstand push-up, GHD, worm squat. They did thrusters, so is that true? Swimming, pull-ups, bar muscle-ups, burpees, toes to bar, sandbag cleans, and pegboard. I don't think most of those really matter. I think To me, they did 21 movements this year. They did 28 movements last year.
Was it the same number of events? I know because when I did the individual stuff, it was
11 events this year. The team ranges from like 9 to 13 typically. In terms of how many lifts and how many short, medium, long, very similar there. I don't want to give away any trade secrets, but I know that there's no such thing. There's no secrets. I'm not going to convince a stranger to run and do sled pushes or pulls. But if you go to the games and the majority of your programming isn't centered around improving your running and sled work, then you don't know what the fuck you're doing. They've done it. They've done the sled 13 times. They've run 7 times. You know what I mean? So like that is a significant portion. There is not another single movement that they've done every year. Not one. There is not another 5 on there. You could argue that the Echo bike is now that next one, just because they used to use the bike erg and now they use the Echo. But looking through all of this stuff, I don't think the complaining, I would say it's like a 60-40, like 60% shut up and get to work and 40% like they probably should have had some handstand push-ups and some burpees and some of the more traditional elements in there. But at the same time, they've only done handstand push-ups twice in the last 5 years. So you can complain about them not being part of their like big picture. We'll get into that on the indie side for sure.
Yep.
But like they don't do them that often. So like the pull-up bar and the burpees were a bit more of the like, where were those? And you wonder if that's Castro coming in and logistically making things a little bit easier.
So what I was just thinking though, as you're talking, is you did say, we're on the pull-up bar doing burpees. Maybe it's the bigger picture of like what semifinals in the games are.
Exactly.
It's like, hey, you had to do a bunch of burpees at semifinals. You had to do those synchronized muscle ups at semifinals. So maybe they're like, oh yeah, maybe they have their own movement tracker and like, check the season for, preceding the games. We made sure these happened. Obviously athletes want to see things they're potentially good at. And when they don't show up in competition, that's a bit of a bummer. But that's kind of where my mind went as you were saying that. It's like, yeah, we didn't see any of that at the CrossFit Games, but maybe they thought that itch was scratched one stage earlier. And if, hey, they're good enough to do those things, that it's fine to do something potentially a little bit different. There is something to say about what a burpee does for just a team and communication and just,
They normally do 1 to 2 chippers as well on the team side. They didn't do any of those. And again, you don't know, like Boz did 28 movements for the team last year.
Yeah.
But was that a shit show or was there a reason why
it changed? Yeah.
They pared that down this year. So my job needs to be, what am I preparing these people for? And I'm very confident that I know what they need to prepare for and how we need to do it. That's what I care about. The other side of it is, making sure athletes go into this with, I'm not choosing the programming. That is not something that I do. So like the right team could have a narrative where they feel camaraderie and the like, man, if we had more gymnastics, that would be awesome. But the wrong team making it seem like someone else is in charge of their destiny, that's a huge fucking problem.
Sort of undercuts the teams that do well too. It's like, hey, those teams are fit regardless. Like the same teams tend to be showing up near the top over again.
And they were winning weird tests.
Yes.
They were smacking people around in the weird ones. And that's when it's like, okay.
Well, that's sort of what the CrossFit Games is for a lot of those teams too. It's like, hey, you're all inside the 4 walls of the CrossFit gym all the time. The 21-15-9s, you guys are all hammer. It's like, can you separate your stuff on the stuff that you guys don't normally see inside your normal day-to-day training? Like, are you running hard and can you do it all together?
Yeah. Can
you bike really well, understand how to use a bike well? Those are things that, again, separate the best teams from teams that are in the, the teens and 20s or maybe even get cut, is that they're all going to be good at the 21-15-9s, but can you be good at the things that don't show up as often? And when they do show up, can you really separate yourself from everybody else who is good at the normal 21-15-9s?
I also think that's a pretty good segue to the indie side, because I think that the men and women, the specific ones who stood at the top of the podium, had these victories or did really well in like things that you would assume are like polar opposites. So it could be a time domain or a certain skill or whatever. That to me is when the programming is okay, especially if they have one lower finish, because it's like, okay, can this just be swapped in? Like people get really wrapped up in like, ooh, this person, they suck at GHD sit-ups. And it's like, yeah, if they put them in, they would have had a 30th and it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah, it's the same reason. Like when you have we've always got the one odd event, like this year, the inverted medley. It's like the extremely niche kind of skill thing or something.
Yeah.
There is an event where an athlete just tanks for whatever reason. And it's like the most well-rounded athlete, like that's only going to happen once because there's such a small number of movements, time domains, whatever, that they're deficient in compared to the rest of the field, that it's not going to matter after 11 or 13 events.
That's exactly what happened to Laura. I mean, that was her worst finish in the entire competition. She finished like 25th or 27th, something like that.
Yeah, and Adler finished 25th in the pig chipper and then was effectively top 10 minus one. So, all right. So, individual events. So I did a little bit of the analysis kind of based on our, like the Misfit Athletics internal, terminology and whatnot. And for maybe newer listeners, we consider short workouts to be somewhere between 0 and 8 minutes. For the games, we kind of, that's a little bit of a gray area. Helena, for example, was a lot of athletes just over 8 minutes, but for the purpose of what that event and test was, that was a short workout. So, medium typically extends to around 16 minutes, but again, like the 5K run, athletes running
10 to
their ass
20-ish
off. Yeah, 10 to
games,
20.
somewhere in that range.
And then at the games is where you're like, well, the marathon row is certainly long. So, what? And then for our muscle, we basically have kind of 3 stimuli that we think about. Muscle overload, fairly self-explanatory. I have to stop because my arms don't work. The gas tank workout, the one that makes you gasp for air, every 10 or 20 reps. And then your cardio workout where it's it's either continuous movement, it's a monostructural element, whatever. So my kind of analysis here, we were looking at 5 or 5 to 7 short workouts. I kind of classified short, medium in there as well, but effectively 7 short workouts, 2 medium workouts, 2 long workouts, and 1 lift. Is that about the ballpark that you had?
Yep. Yeah, I had
with the medium 5K. You kind of said.
Yeah, I had the 5K. Like you think about 5K and alpaca. Like alpaca to me felt like a long workout. They ran their asses off for the. You know what I mean? So like part of me is just thinking about this from that standpoint of like steady state versus super high intensity. What I'm trying to say is a very imperfect analysis, but it works for us then figuring out what the program should look like.
Yeah, we keep it consistent. So, it's internal for us. And as long as we're consistent with how we decide that, like, then we can get a proper evaluation of what the games are.
But I think it's worth saying, how many events were there?
11.
How many short workouts were there maybe?
7.
Yeah. And that happened last year too.
Yep.
By the way.
Short, quick, and intense.
4 muscle overload, 4 gas, 3 cardio. If you include, let's see, what did I do here? I think I included the lift as the muscle overload.
So that means we got to start over, right?
Yeah.
We have 1 phase. That's, I'm sorry.
Delete the lift.
Two monostructural events being the long ones, which was kind of interesting. The 2 long ones, typically we saw the long events, think like the Capital Bike to Work last year, like the long events were quote CrossFit as opposed to exclusively monostructural. So that's a interesting point. 2 couplets, 3 if you include the final, 3 triplets, 4 if you include the final, 3 chippers, and then 1 lift. And just a brief, like, high level before we go into your guys' thoughts. Similar kind of thing. So I say no handstand push-ups. I know they were freestanding. I definitely classify that as a, balance coordination skill, neurological kind of element rather than handstand push-up capacity.
It was a handstand walking.
It was a handstand walk event. That was the inversion component. And just a lack of pressing in general. There was still the overhead stuff, but we didn't necessarily see a tremendous amount of pressing. Big missing, no swimming. I have to assume that was a potential logistical city of Madison sort of thing with the venues or the lake or whatever, but no swimming, no GHD, no pegboard, no yoke, no vests. Again, I've got kind of thoughts on why that might be. And then, sure. Kick us off, man. What's the analysis here? You came into my office and you were talking about teens and masters a little bit more, and you were like, was it laziness? Like, it felt like they programmed the minimum
they brought out like 6
necessary
pieces of
stuff.
Like, this is only 6 things.
Ted, can we get is there a womp 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 for that fucking final?
Sorry.
What the fuck was that?
I mean, honestly,
Oh
like
my
bar muscle ups.
God.
I
smash,
like
yeah.
the high stakes of you got to try to hang.
Sorry,
on
I
for
fell
20
asleep. What'd you say?
Bar muscle ups. I like that part of it, but ending with a fucking dumbbell squat snatch is so fucking stupid.
It's not a bad workout.
No. Again, a fine workout, but it's a terrible movement to be in a final. It would have been better if they made him do 100-pound dumbbell snatches, just power snatches, and made him fucking grit through something like that. I just don't like the subjective nature of like, everyone knows what a dumbbell squat
Master's
snatch looks like.
mobility test.
If you have, I mean, don't get me started on that, because there are masters who are allowed to lock their arms out, and that's a good rep, and you have other people who can do this, and they call it a good dumbbell snatch rep. And it's like, if you make half the field do this, and half of them can do that.
They did say before that your arm did not need to be straight, right? Wasn't that part of the standard?
Yeah,
to be
but-
above your head.
I hate that.
Imagine being as strong as Mike Kern and being able to hold a dumbbell above your head, but
he's
not
like,
locked
he's
out.
trying to dumbbell snatch.
And a fucking static bicep curl, a static Arnold.
So I just don't like the subjective nature of that final. But honestly, the age group and master stuff just felt like they're like, all right, we're going to bring a skier, a biker, echo bike, and all right, we can do all these events. Whatever. Here's 7 events. Good luck to you with that. And it felt like it was missing something. Like, one of the big complaints last year is there was like no skills in the event, and like they added a little bit this year. But honestly, the event itself, I felt for the age group could have been a bit more. It just felt like it was missing. Just, I don't know. There was just workouts that you remember that sticks in your mind year after year, something that stands out. And there wasn't one of those for the age group.
Felt like when we can talk about this. I've got this kind of queued up for the end as far as like the future of the event or the sport itself, but like did feel like it's like broadcast wasn't great, programming was like
meh.
It's like what's a great way
It felt like a warning shot.
Yeah, it might have been a warning shot, but switching over to like individual, how important was it the fact that we didn't have some of those like major implements? We all understand that just because a movement isn't there doesn't mean you're not testing athletes appropriately, but it is a little bit interesting. Like a lack of swimming is fairly significant. I'll ask the question. I'm not saying one way or the other, but Laura Horvath wins the year there are no handstand push-ups.
No pressing.
I think she's phenomenal, and I'm not saying that she wouldn't have won otherwise, but you do have to ask the question.
I would say 3 main thoughts. The first one is, I think the biggest critique that I have heard is there were no barbells.
It did seem a little bit redundant. The sandbags
There was
were a
one.
couple
There was
times.
one barbell in a Metcon, correct?
Yes.
The whole time, just the thruster.
Just the thruster
Yeah,
at
so
the
it's
end.
just the
Thruster and
final.
ollie total. That's it.
Good luck in a workout versus Laura or Jeff with a barbell.
Lol.
Like specialty.
Go watch the pig flip if you want any indication of how that would go against her. Like go watch that. It's insane.
So I think that was one of the ways for them to be like, it doesn't actually matter. And they're trying to show off the methodology in a way, this idea of general physical preparedness.
It's like 2018 regionals.
So I was okay with that. And I think that they had the right champions, because I think this whole strict handstand push-up thing is a single like implement sort of a deal. And I'm sure if you took her echo press score from last year and swapped it in for something this year, she still would have won. So that's sort of where my mind goes. But the question,
27th in the inverted medley.
Yep. The question for me is, are we critiquing this from the standpoint of, do I get to write the games next year? If I get to write the games next year, it would be quite a bit different. But my job is to prepare athletes and to put out into the world what we think is the right way to prepare athletes. 2 years ago, no Boz, I wrote mock games and went to you, and you said, what the fuck is this? The amount of pulling gymnastics is, you're going to kill them.
Yeah.
And I just said, look at the movement tracker.
Yeah.
They've been doing this. Is not Boz. They've been doing this forever. Do we agree with it? Do we think it should be this way? Should it be rope climb, toe to bar, chest to bar, pull over, kettlebell
Muscle
clean
up.
and jerk, bar muscle up? Should that be how they do it? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be programmed in a different way for that question to be answered, but they have been fucking waxing you guys with upper body pulling for a very long time. They've been doing that, and if I had to guess, they're going to continue to do it. They did it at quarterfinals. They did it at semifinals. We were all waiting for a change.
Well, to be fair, we all said, and I think after semifinals, we said this, we were like, fuck, I'm so sorry, athletes, about your upper bodies, because the volume of pressing in semifinals was extraordinary. So there's also the question of, and people tend to forget this, like the test is, yes, it is, the test is the CrossFit Games, but we're also considering the stages of competition prior to that. Like athletes who are there have proven their capacity in handstand, push-up, pressing, gymnastics and whatnot over the course of quarterfinals and semifinals. So was that a specifically, understood, or, did they program with that in mind, or is that just how the event shook out? And you have to think that the amount of testing and stuff that goes into the events, that was a conscious decision, but it doesn't change the fact that, like, I had the note in there that there was a fuckload of pulling, like,
so
my hands,
I don't know
grip,
how many movements they did
arms.
this year. I believe it was in the 28 range.
I didn't count that. So.
The ones that we guessed correctly: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Those were the ones that were
28?
Those were the ones that were on our list for mock games. We do a definitely, probably, maybe. If you're in the definitely list and you didn't make the cut, you get slid over to probably. Maybe is the like stuff that comes up every once in a while, and then everything else is there. The misses, quote unquote, were pullovers, which we asked athletes to practice. And the traverse, and those things cost $8,000. So
we looked.
Those were the only movements that were not programmed. And like, I'm pretty good at tooting my own horn, but like I can count. So again, what is the critique supposed to be based on? Like, it would be fun to go through and program our own, but the amount of work that it would take to do it right and have testing and think about the logistics and all that is a little silly.
You only got 92.8% of the movements right.
So I'm just
idiots.
And again, that's just like, I had this long talk with Chandler about it, and he's the kind of person, he programs for himself, and he wants to know these things. He wants to know how we came up with mock games and where they came from. And he comes up with his own definitely, probably, maybe lists, and, takes some of our workouts, creates some of his own. And again, it's not rocket science. I think the plan to improve you on those things is rocket science. I can't just write like run, go, like in there. So we need to be able to do that.
Program, sure. Run,
I almost think it's a disservice to what we do to come in and say, we know that there should be more pressing. The sport has so much upper body pulling at the games level. They run, they do sleds, they always get upside down.
Yeah, and is it unfair to say there was no pressing when it was just like, well, there's like the pig flip, there's a jerk in that, the inverted medley was entire upside down, kettlebell clean and jerks, let's go muscle up, there's the pressing there, there's the
bar
parallel
muscle
bar
up, you've
pull,
got
bar
it.
muscle up,
Thruster.
Overhead, like, is overhead work considered?
Right.
Like, is it actual thrusters? Does it actually matter that there wasn't? And when you think about it, it's like, are we actually just being specific to gymnastics pressing of a very specific variety that wasn't there? And
a better question in the past was the mix of non-CrossFit to CrossFit, because we would watch someone like a Rich fall behind a little, and then, like Laura did, have that final day where it's like, you guys don't stand a fucking chance in here.
Yeah.
And the question is, like, is the methodology itself what gets us to that point, and then we should test something else? Should it all be CrossFit? Like, there were 8 to 9 traditional CrossFit workouts out of 12, right? But then, like, is a lift a CrossFit workout? Was the gymnastics thing a CrossFit workout with a mono strut? You know what I mean? Like, those were always on .com. So they're unique questions, but I think if you are placing the blame for how you did on these things, you got to start paying attention, or your coach needs to start paying attention to what this stuff is over and over, because they're going to continue to do the same things. And until they don't, I don't understand why we need to complain about it.
Yeah, I think the personal responsibility thing's huge here. Like, if you're not a historian of the game, you don't pay attention to that stuff, and you aren't willing to do those things more often, like, sort of shame on you, because I do agree that, like, we need a good balance of what feels like non-CrossFit stuff with CrossFit stuff, but you can't have deficiencies in those things. You just can't omit them. You need to be athletic. You need to do things that are outside your comfort zone. Sign up for things like Spartan races. So when the obstacle course shows up at the CrossFit Games, you've never climbed a cargo net before, or you've never traversed over a log or swung on a rope. Like, some people are like, oh, it's kind of fucking stupid. Like, what are we, Tarzan out here? It's like, no, they understand how to move their body through space. They have coordination. They have accuracy. These things matter. Again, it's just going to be my personal opinion whether or not you agree there should be, 3 of those to 5 of these, or 2 of those to 7 of those.
Yeah.
Personally, I am in favor of seeing weird things like that happen, because one of the core tenets of CrossFit is the unknown and unknowable and ready for anything. I love when they throw a test and the athletes have no, like, chaos. I love that event. They didn't know how many reps they were doing, and they're just like, I've built up this crazy work capacity. I have no idea how many I'm going to do. I don't know when I'm going to get to move on. So I'm just going to make sure I'm as ready as possible, and stuff like that. I really think speaks to the methodology, and one of the elements that makes CrossFit so cool, in my opinion.
You think they had that sufficient, like, kind of unknown and unknowable? Because like, looking at the list of events, aside from the inverted medley, pretty much everything is something that they've done in some capacity before. And like, even the inverted medley, I wouldn't say was so unique that it threw athletes for a serious loop. Like, does it matter?
The athletes in the back that looked bad just handstand walking were the ones that couldn't. It was very much like when you see someone back there who, when they're upside down, they're comfortable, they figured out how to do it in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And I liked that.
Yeah.
I liked that. I saw some athletes that, like, just did like 800 donkey kicks in a row trying to get up onto that box, and not realizing that you either need to set your hips over your head or your feet. Like, that's it. That's the whole thing. So I don't know how great the test was, but I think it accomplished what they wanted it to.
I think it was better than last year's fucking whip
Circus
yourself
show?
on the circus
fiasco?
show. Yeah.
I just want to know
overall kind of
if there
party
was
tricks.
one of those when they got to Rogue and Castro put his sunglasses on and walked outside.
What is this?
7 short events. So we know CrossFit methodology. We like to go short, medium, long, but live most of your life in
workouts
couplets
short
and
and intense.
triplets. Keep up workouts short and intense.
Last
Go
year
long
it was 2,
occasionally.
3, 8, 1. It was 8 short events last year.
8 short events.
Yeah.
So it is.
And
it
he
is
said, we all wondered what he meant when Boz said, you guys have gone too far in one direction, and I'm going to, like, make you realize that you have. So there's something, he has a bias to short and intense. That's for sure.
I think he has a bias to traditional CrossFit. Like,
Sure.
and I don't know if, like, you can not have a bias toward traditional CrossFit and program the CrossFit Games, but I do think, like, we saw that last year with things like the rowing requirement in Jackie Pro and stuff like that, where it was like, and the run, where it was like the running and the split jerk were 2 separate events, so you have to be able to run hard and lift heavy. You don't get to strategize and game around it. So
The only other thing is that, can we not, with that 2-parter, you don't know who won?
Oh yeah, that's kind of whack.
Don't do that. Don't
was
do
that?
that.
Unless they have
I
some
thought you
running clock that tells you how long.
learned, maybe learned when you had 800.
Oh, the intervals.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you,
What
Who's
happened?
winning?
I
don't
might
know.
not have missed that.
Who's winning? I have
you
no
rest
idea.
They didn't
until you
upload-
rest until 6 minutes, and then you go again, and your score was your time from both. So unless you're a very savvy fan, and you're doing quick math and comparing it to previous heats,
Sure, yeah.
I had 20 stopwatches
Did
going
they
at
do
once.
that? Sherm's got a fucking trench coat in the back. He's like, "You want to buy a watch?" Did
selling watches.
did they do that? Did they do it for the only 2 events I can think of that had a similar format? Was last year's running, the 800, or the shuttle running and the split jerk, and then I don't remember how many years prior, but it was the pool where it was the really shitty intervals. It was like every 2020,
Yeah, it was
every
the COVID
X
year.
event, it was the ball slams, the swimming, and it was like
But with 5
interval.
people, you could be like,
could be a little better.
Sam Quant's off the bike first every round.
Sure, yeah.
So
One.
with this one, it was like, you know, I was watching and I understood, like when Annie went sub 4 and was the first person to do that, I kept my eye on like, man, she's probably going to get back to the mean and be more like 430, 440 in this next one.
Yeah.
Whereas there were the separators that came out and did both of them more in the 4-minute range, which was interesting. I just don't think that event, if you're trying to globalize and get more people involved, it makes no sense.
Do you think it was more like? I think it was probably more detrimental to the viewer than the athlete.
Yes.
As an athlete,
Yeah.
it's almost
Workout- yeah.
impossible
No,
to
workout's
figure
fine for
that
the
out. It
athlete.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like it was a great test, but
Nice little athlete IQ test.
sure,
They could have fixed that by just having some sort of like, all right, you have to immediately rest 1 minute. You sit on your rower until it's go time, and then the judge raises their hand. It's time to go. Like, and then it becomes a race again. That's like, obviously not the greatest thing because people are resting at different times. And you're like, what the hell's going on here? If you come in the middle of the event, but that could be one way to make it a little more viewer friendly if you're watching from the beginning. It would just be a little bit logistical, fiasco to figure out.
Also ironic that they want to take this to another country, but they didn't have anyone back there to explain the workout properly to Roman or to
Right.
communicate with him while he was going.
Not great. Not great.
Figure that out.
all right.
Sigh.
Let's wrap up here. We're gonna wrap up with the press conference
Yep.
because I think that was kind of an important element of the games as far as like what we could see next. Questions were asked about where we're going, and you kind of alluded to the fact that actually Castro said something like it might be necessary in the future of the sport to be bouncing around from venue to venue for probably a combination of exposure, for the fact that just like opening this up to different markets. Don Fall announced that they were going to be on ESPN again, which brings up a whole nother question of the broadcast, which is something that we've talked about previously about how fucking impossible it is to follow the sport unless they do something to improve it for viewers. And then just Castro also alluded to like just the fucking logistical demand of something like this. Like you and Ted more so than myself and Sherb are fans of Formula One, and they call it the traveling circus, but they've also got billions of dollars at their disposal to do that. CrossFit does not have the ability CrossFit has dozens and dozens of dollars.
Coffers of pennies.
And there was the alluding to the fact that Don was like, hey, when everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And as much and as inspirational as the adaptive teens and masters divisions are, and as important as they are to the community, we made the tough decision to say, like, we need to allocate resources and energy towards broadcasting the individuals and teams.
Can they find a partner that will still call it the CrossFit Games and run those somewhere else at a different time?
That'd be great.
Because they're going to create a vacuum if they get rid of it, and everyone's going to say they're the new Masters Games, and no one will be the new Masters Games. I think there's probably a thoughtful solution to that. And
is it just online?
I think that's going to be the first stage of it. It might be the first couple of years is figuring that out before they figure out who to potentially give it to or how they're going to do that.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna be like the occupational games. That's the vibe I got from the investment they had this year, and this the amount of resources they currently allocated to it. Because I understand what they had to do there. That you had to make sure, like, we want to showcase the premier athletes, tip of the spear, because that's what has always helped drive people into boxes. I do think it's a shame that the two communities that have the most to gain, I think, the young kids coming up into the sport and what that CrossFit can do for young people as they mature and potentially find themselves and have an appreciation for what their bodies can do. Like, that's an amazing element of CrossFit that doesn't get talked about a lot outside of those commercials you see in between events. And then you have all the masters who are, able to play with grandkids and do things that, you got a picture of a 6-year-old person in your head from like 30 years ago.
Because those divisions, the one that get the least viewership, are the divisions that theoretically represent CrossFit the most, right? It's like kids getting into fitness at an early age to the point where they, that's part of their routine. It's part of their lives. It's part of it's they understand the importance of it. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum is the idea of, just as you age, being able to remain functional and remain on your own 2 feet and continue to do things like that. And and adaptive athletes as well. It's like CrossFit is in fact it's not for everyone, but it is for anyone. And it's just like, how do we balance that? And it goes back to the kind of the confusion between like, who are we? What is CrossFit the CrossFit Games? Is CrossFit health? And where does that fall on the spectrum? Is CrossFit a sport like the NFL? Or is it just a representation of something that, happens at the local level?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a huge question, and it has a lot to do with our bottom line as a company. This is who we coach for. I just
CrossFit's bottom line
think
too.
they need to attract the right partners. I mean, so much of the money in other spaces is based on this is huge. A ton of people watch it, and within the CrossFit space, yes, the number of people is less. But they're fucking psychotic about it. They're fanatical. Fans. They will buy every shoe and every shirt that they think they need and every supplement. And they keep bringing in these sterile seeming brands that the community doesn't have a connection to.
Yeah, Monster Energy.
Well, I mean, there's that, but there's also I don't want to throw shade at I won't even say the company's name, but the supplement company, they're big enough and they have the money to do it. But no one gives a fuck. No one's buying your multivitamins. Like the company that sponsors them is the one that I go to, that I went to and bought all the supplements when Maya was pregnant. Is that the same as people who want pre-workout with 400 milligrams of caffeine in it and 50 grams per scoop of protein? It's just not the same. And again, I know it's a money thing, but it's not a money thing when you look forward and forecast out into the future. They have to find the right partners to bring in. And I know that it would be unique to bring in a partner that had, okay, here's $5 million. That's also very in tune with the CrossFit space, but they have to find those partnerships. They fucking absolutely have to. And I think Noble's gone. That's the rumor
seems to be
the rumor. Yeah. They were bought out and are now above water again, which is I guess good for them.
But who knows what that does for their brand and
right.
how they
run. Someone who flips businesses, takes something from 500 million to 5 billion. Maybe they know better than I do, but I assume that sponsoring the CrossFit Games for what they charge them is probably not something that they should do. And the other brands are we've seen that it doesn't help that much.
Yeah.
Why would we do it? Yeah. I just hope it's Rogue.
That'd be dope.
Yeah. I've always just hoped it would be Rogue.
I feel like it would certainly make the most sense, but it's is it just Rogue's the equipment sponsor? Is it just Rogue? It's the Rogue
Vitamin
CrossFit
Water
Games.
CrossFit Games.
I don't know if they didn't want to do it or they were waiting until they're a whatever $200 million company now. They're a really big entity. So
boys, got any tea on the where we're going next year?
We communicated with someone who will not be named that really seemed like he fucking knew where it was going to be and was not making fun of us, but where did you hear, so that he could say no.
Yeah.
It's not in Southern California. It's not overseas. And it might be in Austin, Texas.
Fuck, that's not a...
Dude, 105 degrees, not okay.
Yeah.
Let's not.
Indoor CrossFit Games next year.
The indoor. Sponsored by Indoor.
Yeah.
Sponsored by Window.
Oh, now they can get closer to Border Patrol.
I think they need a city to show up and lay it all out there and be facilities are free, like that whole thing. We know you're gonna, because supposedly, according to a cab driver, Wisconsin's going to lose $20 million, or Madison's going to lose $20 million from not having them back. So obviously that is a significant thing for a Midwestern city. So if that's the case, Rogue's in Ohio. Is Ohio Columbus a possible place? They've got that crazy convention center there. They were going to build a stadium, which they never did. I don't think they did.
I don't think so either. Didn't that same cab driver tell us where it was going to be next year? I forget where he's.
He told us they'd already signed the contract.
Jesus Christ.
Because Sydney said it would be free.
Enjoy.
They would basically pay for the whole.
They would need it to be free for all 8 attendees.
Half of the
and 6
athletes,
viewers.
half of the athletes would not go.
No, absolutely not.
Who can afford that?
All right, live stream happens at 12:15 a.m. Eastern time.
Also, like, there's a reason F1 takes like 9 weeks before they go to Australia, and then 9 weeks after they go to Australia. Like, that is a ridiculous thing to do.
That is a logistical nightmare.
I forgot it was Australia. That is right, Ted. It was Australia. It's already signed. It's already on paper.
All right, gentlemen. Final thoughts.
Oh man. Whoa.
That is a good doggy.
He said, gentlemen, final
That
thoughts.
was Castle's final
that technically is all he can say.
That is literally everything
It's
Castle's
like Groot, though. We got to be
say.
able to discern exactly
Castle, what are we
he said
thinking,
there.
kid?
Go ahead,
Going
Sherb.
to Austin, Texas?
Final thoughts.
I thought Sherb was going to bark.
No, I'm not going to bark. A little bittersweet having it be Jenna's last year, having worked together for the last 3 years and seeing her go from the 14-15 division to 16-17 and just seeing the consistency the day in and day out and just knowing that like her story's not written, but the book's kind of open-ended right now. What's going to happen next? Like, that's an athlete that like had a bit of a frustrating weekend. Had she put together the same kind of day that she did on Tuesday and Thursday that she did on Wednesday, like Wednesday was a real struggle for her mentally. The outcome at the end of the day would be different. She was probably less than a half a second from third place across the entire weekend. So like just lots to build on moving forward. And it was, I don't want to say like a farewell tour for teenager and I'm never going to work with her again, but it was just like a very like bittersweet moment to have spent all that time working with her and seeing what she put together and just seeing the potential there, and which makes me excited for the fact that she is kind of aging out of the teenage division, because if the girl that I know worked as hard as she does day in and day out and then had nothing to shoot for at the end of the season, like an online qualifier to figure out who the fittest teenager on earth would be, that would be a bummer. So like very proud of the effort she put forward for the weekend. And, I know she listens to these podcasts, so I just wanted to tell her like via podcast as opposed to like text messages, like how proud I was of her across the entire weekend and how excited I am for the future, because I think the future for her is very, very bright amongst the other athletes I work with, but specifically her, being that we've worked together for the last almost 4 years.
I think it's hard to parse all of this information. I mean, we got back from the games 4 days ago, and this is all, for me, such a weird time of year. We are like knee deep in phase 1 and phase 2 when this happens. You have the like, I'm coaching these very specific people and like I'm doing my athlete analysis just like I would for the programming of the games. I'm doing those for individual athletes. We're leaving Madison. We don't know where the games are going to be next year. There's always the scary thing of like sanctuary regionals are coming back, and they're taking place on the moon.
Nice. Cheaper than Australia.
There's so much to like process during this time of year. So I'm on like information overloads. One of the reasons why I do write out all of my like shout out posts in a Word document every year, just to like start to work through this stuff, because I'm the kind of person that if I don't process, then I have too many things swimming around and it's hard to get like actual focused work done. So I'm currently working through all that, and I feel like there will be more on future podcasts, but you can probably tell that I'm in like coach reset mode. So I'm talking about the programming and I am bringing up certain things about it, but they're like specific details. And well, I knew they were only going to do pulling gymnastics. So like at this moment, while processing, like, I don't give a fuck. That's what they do every year. That's what they do. So that's what we're going to prepare people for. And, my mind goes to like, I really want to like sit here and talk about Jenna. I really want to sit here and talk about Paige. What Paige did was absolutely incredible, but my words are currently being typed in my brain, and will continue to be typed into a Word document coming to an Instagram post near you somewhat soon. We're going to talk on a future podcast episode when we have dead time about your hiatus and how that, if you like it.
From Madison?
No, from Instagram.
I was like, what?
Is it as awesome as I think it is?
It's been pretty great. I'll tell you, I
can't wait to see you get back to your DMs at some point.
I have not once. I did.
I sent you some bangers, kid. I keep forgetting.
I opened it like 2 or 3 weeks into the hiatus, and I had like, it was like like 30 different people, like 9+ messages, and I'm like, nope, closed it, redeleted
It's so
the
great
app.
because I was gonna show him the whole final with the teams thing with Alexis getting pulled up by bra straps by Brandon. He's like, no, don't show me that. I'm not going on Instagram. Don't do that. I don't want to see it.
You did. No, I just said I'm not on Instagram. Like, you can just tell me. But I was like, no, it's been
Hunter's one of those
It's been
people you got to go to
perfectly
Instagram
fine.
downloader.com and download the video and send it to him, and then that way he's not on Instagram.
I had to type in facebook.com into my browser the other day for like and I've had to
gym
do that
stuff.
for Instagram
Yeah.
for gym stuff, like instagram.com, and they're just like, who the fuck? Like,
I
this
try to
one
only let
IP
myself
address.
do that, but
Huh? Really? Okay. Well, I don't want to be on Instagram though. Ever.
You use a separate platform to post to Instagram.
yeah, and you
Oh.
can stay away from it. I did that when I had Flippy.
Oh, interesting. No,
People
see,
were
I
like,
feel like that's
"How
cheating.
the
I would rather
fuck
just
did
like
you-"
my life is perfectly fine. I have no desire
fuck
to
off it,
download
yeah.
it.
My
Even
excuse is that I own too many businesses not to be active on social media.
Fucking worst.
I could make that argument too, minus the owning part of, and I just don't. It's fine. It's great. It's way better. Save a lot of time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into this games wrap-up edition of the Misfit Podcast. Again, you guys can head to misfitathletics.com. We're in smack dab in the middle of phase 0. That is kind of our baseline testing phase where you guys are establishing numbers, 1-rep maxes, all kinds of monostructural stuff, and some unique Misfit benchmarks. And that just kind of sets you up for success for the upcoming training season, where phase 1 kicks off September 4th. Question mark, maybe? So,
Correct.
Always a good idea, especially if you're a new listener and you're just like, this is interesting to me, is a great idea to start prior to phase 1. The first week of a phase always tends to knock people on their asses. It will no doubt do the same thing this year, but just as a little bit of a primer for maybe potential new misfits, great idea to get into phase 1 to have that data so that your training year is successful.
Truth.
We did it.
See ya.
Bye.